All right. Welcome, everyone. By everyone, I mean all 5 of you to week 2 of Pro 221 Business Communications. And I'm glad that you could be here. I'm glad that you're reviewing this session. Hopefully, we'll make this week's discussion board very easy, or at least give you the information that you need in order to feel comfortable and confident that you can accomplish this week's coursework with no problem at all. So tonight, that's the goal. We're going to go over some different material. We're going to go over some of the articles of the assigned reading. Before we do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about last week. For those of you, for all of you, all 5 of you were able to complete at least the main post on the discussion board. I have graded everything that was completed through tonight. And as I mentioned before, or in the week 1, if you find yourself not getting full credit on any of the coursework, I'll usually explain why in the response and encourage you to accomplish whatever you're missing. So something that happens very commonly on discussion boards is that you get the main post done, but you are not able to complete the responses, or you get a main post done, but it's not following all the instructions or is not complete. So all those things would reduce the points that you were able to get, and all those things are things that you can fix after the fact, after you get your grade, resubmit or edit, and get into a situation where you can improve your score. Okay, so if you didn't get full credit last week on the discussion board, which is a significant part of this course's total points, then I would strongly encourage you to go in and edit or add the information that you need in order to get full credit for the week. All right, so having said that, I was very impressed with last week. Your memos were very good. One of the things that, that is important in a memo is to be brief, to the point, explain, like we talked about last week, kind of the why behind what you're asking to have done or asking to change, and then be very clear and specific about what changes you would like people to make, and then thank them for the change or reiterate the importance of the change, the why again, and wrap it up with confidence that they can accomplish it. So there's some basic things that a good memo will have. I feel like we may have led you astray a little bit by having a 150-word minimum writing requirement, or maximum writing requirement, excuse me, because in all reality, a lot of memos can be much shorter. Some of them need to be much longer. But in the case of the example that we gave for this last week, as far as device use on, at the workplace, that could be something that could be accomplished in even fewer words. This is why it's important for us to be professional and not have our customers be distracted, or us to be distracted in serving our customers by devices that we have. Here is the policy. There will be no devices, whatever it is, a couple bullet points, and then, I'm confident that if we do this, that we will accomplish better customer service scores, or higher sales, or higher customer satisfaction, which means that we'll have return customers and referral customers, which are the lifeblood of the revenue of our business and the reason we all have jobs, type of thing. So I'm getting a little sidetracked, but you get the point. We just want a quick message of what it is that we're asking someone to do, and then wrap it up and be done. So for the most part, your memos were very good. Most of you followed kind of that format. Some of you, had what I would consider to be, some extra information or kind of side information that wasn't, specific to the point of what you were trying to accomplish. And a few of you weren't very clear on what the new policy would be. You need to be very, very clear on exactly what you expect as far as the new policy. So some things that we can improve there. If we were to do those same memos again, I think all of you would find ways to improve your memos. But for the most part, they were very good. And I appreciate people's participation last week. As I mentioned, if you didn't get the full credit for it, you're still welcome before the end of the course to edit or add information for additional points. It may not give you full credit, right? Because we talked about in week 1, full credit requires you to follow the instructions and turn things in on time. If you turn things in on late or have to edit or add after the due date, I can give you partial credit. And in a class like this, where most of your score comes from just 4 discussion weeks, I'd strongly encourage you to add responses or do edits, to improve those scores for your weekly discussion board score. Okay, so that's last week. Like I say, I've taught a lot of classes over the past 5 years through Steven Senegar and online. I have yet to have a class where all participants accomplish all the work every week. I have very few times in my history of teaching where all participants even participate in 1 week. And so I'm very excited and happy to see that all of you participated on the discussion board last week. That's a rare occasion for me. And even though there's only 5 of us, I still thought to celebrate and pause and appreciate the fact that you did that. So thank you very much. All right. So a couple things that we want to accomplish tonight. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable with this week's discussion board and talk through what's going to be required. And in doing so, we're going to go through some slides on different communication issues. And tonight, I want to go through, some different devices or methods of communication, talk about why they might be important, why they are adding value to the workplace, but then talk about some of the concerns and some of the issues surrounding using that particular device or that particular technology. And then if we get some time at the end, I want to talk about how technology has changed the workplace. We had an article last week about how it potentially changes our relationships at home, with our families, with relationships that are important, how society moving away from face-to-face communication or even verbal communication can be detrimental. Definitely can be detrimental. So that's something to consider. It can also be detrimental to a workplace, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. One of the articles talks about how we're kind of in a mode of email overload at this point. And if you aren't at a workplace now or haven't been at a workplace where it's kind of an email overload situation, you at some point probably will be. I can speak from a couple different companies and a couple different career position standpoints, or perspectives that I've been in exactly like this article talks about, in a situation, that Forbes article, where we just end up looking and responding to email, it seems like half the day. So we'll get to that and talk about what business consultants would say about being efficient and not allowing technology and forms of communication to kind of rule our world. And not getting into a situation where we just end up reacting all day long to different forms of communication instead of being proactive and in control of our day and accomplishing those things we set out to do. So should be an interesting discussion there at the end if we have the time. I think we will have the time since we don't have any participants tonight in this session. Nobody for me to interact with. These slides and sessions go a little bit faster than they normally do when we do have participants. Having said that, with only 5 of you, I realize it's hard for some, in a class of 30, I usually have 4 or 5 people. So in a class of 5, if we get 1 or 2, it'd be lucky. And I'd strongly encourage you to participate if you can in future weeks. It makes my job, my life a lot easier when we have participants. And I think it makes the session just better overall to have participation. So please, if you can, join us next week or the week after. Still on Monday nights. Okay, so talking about today's workplace as it pertains to business communication. So let's talk about some different methods. The primary method at this point for most careers, and I realize there are exceptions to this, but for most positions and career paths, is email. There are articles now that talk about how even in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll probably go from having desktops and laptops to a more mobile situation where it's either high-powered mobile devices, phones, or iPads, or iPad-type products that most of us will be using at a work site. and it will go away from these static sites, these PCs or these desk computers. We may still have access to those, but we'll spend more of our time on these mobile devices and devices that don't have to be connected at a desk. So you've already kind of seen that change. A lot of tech companies, a lot of high-tech companies are moving away from desktop computers. They'll issue laptops. Everybody's got laptops, but then they can, move around and do what they want in their workspace. And so it is changing the workspace. As far as today and the current environment, as I mentioned earlier, email is kind of the dominant form of communication. It used to be that we'd all get on the phone, or that we'd walk down the hall and talk to somebody face to face. Now, even if you're in the same room, and I find myself doing this at my workplace, even if you're in the same room and could just kind of talk a little louder to talk through a cubicle or something like that to the person next to you, instead you just zip them an email, forward them the information, send them a file. You don't get out of your desk or up from your desk or even go talk to them. You just use an email. So when are emails being used, or when are they appropriate? There's not very many situations that emails are not appropriate. You can think of a few situations where it would be much better to have a face-to-face conversation. You can think of a few situations where, getting somebody's emotions and feeling would be important. In my world, almost everything can be done via email if it needs to be sent somewhere. In fact, our fax systems go through email. We send all the documents and signatures and paperwork via email. I mean, it's a lot of email every day. But there are some times, and a good example of this would be two of the meetings I had today with different executives of different companies. Those meetings with those couples that I had today really couldn't have been accomplished the way they were in any other way other than in person. So we were talking about different life issues, different planning issues, different feelings that they were having, different concerns that they were having, and those types of things are they're much more difficult via email than they are face-to-face. And so those types of meetings they're needed. Email is needed, or face-to-face meetings are needed for that type of meeting. They're not able to accomplish that type of communication via email effectively. But almost every other type of communication can be, and in a lot of times should be, accomplished through email. Having said that, we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls that are associated with email later on tonight, and some of the things to avoid. But the bottom line is, if there is something that needs to be communicated, it needs to happen relatively fast, and maybe there needs to be a paper trail or reminder trail, for that individual. Email is a highly effective, great way of communicating. From a security standpoint, email is traceable, it's trackable. It can, it can be very, very secure as well. So there's a couple different ways that you can secure email. Of course, if you were to use a personal account like a Hotmail or Gmail or Yahoo account, it's not very secure. Okay, those companies use a lot of security measures, but as far as encryption or anything like that, it's usually not the case. They're not encrypted emails. They put a lot of money and effort into security, but those types of emails tend to get hacked. And can be traced, and you can have the wrong people looking at the information you're sending. So that's one of the reasons why Hillary Clinton has been under heat over the last few years, or under fire, is because she was using email, right? She was communicating about Secretary of State issues via her personal email. And a job as important as Secretary of State and the type of classified material that you'd be dealing with as Secretary of State is important enough and classified enough that she's under considerable pressure to release those emails and at least disclose those emails. She has released them to authorities. She has not released them to the public, and it's unlikely that the public will ever get a hold of all her emails because they are private, and because they are, in some cases, classified. So just a good reminder, Hillary Clinton is a reminder. She's a very smart person. She's a good, a highly effective and successful politician. But as Secretary of State, she made a significant mistake, an error of judgment, in using a personal email for purposes of sending and receiving emails about, classified information and Secretary of State information that should have gone through only a work email. Why only through a work email? Because then it's easier for us to trace, and it's easier for us to archive and search for different issues or problems. But perhaps most importantly, it's a better place for us to keep the information that we're sending and receiving safe and secure and private. Okay? So just something to keep in mind, email can be very secure. One of the systems, well, in my world as a financial advisor, I can't send clients anything via my personal email. And there are two reasons for that. One is because the folks that regulate me and want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing, they want to be able to see everything I do in writing. So every single email that I send and receive is monitored. Okay? They don't read everything that I send and receive, but they can monitor anything at any time to make sure that I'm following policies. The other thing, and I mentioned there are two different things, so they want to regulate me as far as what I'm doing, but secondly, communication that includes account numbers, that includes social security numbers, that includes applications, things like that, which are common to send as well. Those types of things I can send securely via email through my work, and if I put it into a specific email program, it will encrypt and password protect the information that I send, so that even though my email is fairly secure through my workplace, that's even an additional level of security that I can afford myself when I'm sending something if it's got private information in the email. And in fact, by policy, if there is ever private information that is sent via email, I have to use that encryption software to send it. Okay? So security is becoming more and more important. You can cause considerable heartache for a company that you work for if you were to unsecurely send something and have it be hacked or phished to a point where that information was to leak out. Okay, it would cause significant embarrassment to your firm. It would probably guarantee your inability to become promoted if it were deemed that you were the reason for that leak or that information to get out. And so security is just so important now. It's becoming more and more important. Companies spend millions of dollars on security, and part of that is email, because it's the transfer of communication, right? And so by default, that information could be could fall into the wrong hands and could be very detrimental. That information could be very detrimental if it does fall into the wrong hands. And once again, perfect example is Clinton, with her email situation. Why did I put CARE on here? I put CARE because we talk about privacy and security, but one of the things that happens a lot of times with email, and can happen even to the most careful people, is an email can be sent to the wrong place very, very easily. So one of the things that happens now in email is smart email especially, is that when you go to type in somebody's name that you've emailed before, it pre-fills, right? It pre-fills for you, and it's just an easy way, instead of having to type out the entire address that you're sending to. Well, if you work for a large company, or if you work for a company where people have similar names, which almost any large company gets into that situation, it becomes easy to mistakenly, because of that pre-fill situation, send an email to the wrong person. And internally within a company, most times that's not going to do a lot of harm. If it got sent externally without the company to a customer or to a prospect or to somebody that shouldn't have that information, that can become a significant problem. And one of the things that one of the articles that's part of the reading this week talks about is how to basically how to deal with a situation if you were to email private information to the wrong person. And in my world, a heavily regulated world of investments, if we send something to the wrong person that has private information, we immediately have to report it to management, and we have to fill out an incident report. They have to do a follow-up between whoever we sent it to, the person that we should have sent it to make sure that the person that we should have sent it to knows that their private information has been sent to the wrong place. And the person that we did send it to needs to receive a notification that basically is kind of a delete and desist, note that says immediately delete this. It was unauthorized for your receipt. Anyway, there's just a long process of different issues to try to help mitigate the problems that can arise from an email going to the wrong place. But of course, the best way to deal with that is to be very, very careful when sending email. very careful about, for example, pushing reply instead of, reply all. Very careful as, when you put blind copy recipients in instead of, 50 different regular recipients. We don't want a recipient list that's a mile long. We also want to be careful about who we put as blind copy recipients. Is it really their business, as far as what the information that we're sending. So anyway, there's a lot of different issues that take extra care. One of the other things that I would say on the point of care is that I've been caught in a situation where, we're busy throughout the day, we're responding quickly to emails and quickly to people's concerns and questions throughout the day and confirming different things. What happens sometimes is that in our speed and our haste, we end up with an email that's not clear, that's confusing, that actually has misinformation in it, that has poor grammar, has poor wording. That those kinds of things are. An email is susceptible to those kinds of things because the whole point is we're trying to be fast, right, and efficient. And sometimes when we do that, we end up with an email that is not a good email. One of the things that you can do to prevent this, a bad email from being sent, a sloppy or poor email from being sent, is something that I will do many times when I'm trying to get a lot of information into an email. What I'll do is I'll write the email, save it as a draft, but not send it. And then I'll come back to it after 15 or 20 minutes after I've done some other things, and then reread it, re-review it, and then send it. I don't do that for all the little emails that I send throughout the day, but if it's a bigger email that has, for example, proposal options or an explanation of different things that a customer or client could do, it makes sense in those cases many times for me to save that draft and then re-review it later before I send it, just to use extra caution and care when sending that information. As far as formatting is concerned, emails are in a situation now where it's so easy to make them nicely formatted and neatly formatted. An email is mature enough in its history that people expect emails to look decent. They don't expect to get an email in a professional setting that has that is formatted really weird, that has strange font or a strange sizing or something like that. They expect a very clear, easy font and format. And so usually what I'll suggest that people do is just stick to the default format or font of the email program that you're using. And get cute with friends and family if you'd like to when it comes to email, but when it comes to your workplace email, keep it simple. Even I've seen a lot of signatures, the pre-done signatures in business emails that just get crazy, that just get busy and crazy. Just have it be professional and straightforward and helpful. Get the information there that needs to be there, and not more or less. Okay, so we talked a little bit about formatting. We talked a little bit about how to take care that you make sure that emails have good content. Make sure that you have security in mind, and make sure that you always determine what the best form of communication is going to be. We're going to talk about lots of different forms tonight, and it's critical that you always have in mind, what are we really trying to accomplish with this communication? What is it that we're trying to get across? What are we really trying to do with this communication? And which one of the communication formats that we have available to us would really be the best as far as getting that message and that communication accomplished. Okay, so that's email. Then we have, of course, mobile devices. And mobile devices, of course, can include, you talking on your cell phone, texting, of course, and email, of course. Most mobile devices now can accomplish any form of business communication that you might need to accomplish. But the reason I put it as a separate category is more for the sake that there could be differences between how you communicate via mobile device versus, say a desktop or PC. And so let's talk about a few of those. So when you're at a work site or workplace, depending on your career, depending on your job description, it could be highly appropriate for you to just be on your phone, or it could be highly inappropriate for you to be on your phone. For example, if you were at a restaurant, your server was serving and bringing sodas out or bringing waters out to your table and happen to just be looking at their phone, and when they place the drink down on your table and then leave, most people would be irritated by that or feel uncomfortable with that or be upset about that. Or, for example, if you walked into a retail location and instead of getting help, everybody's just sitting on their phone or looking at their phone or mobile device instead of helping you with whatever retail location you're at. That would be something that would make people very uncomfortable and is probably highly inappropriate. I work in a bank setting. When tellers and bankers are sitting on their phone, when people come in to get assistance, it's highly unprofessional as far as customers are concerned to have that happen. So most banks, most branches that I've been part of have a policy where you do not have your phone in front of you when clients are in the branch. You can use your phone on break. You can use your phone, on lunch. You can use your phone, and even have your phone, but don't touch it, when customers are in the location. Just from a professionalism standpoint, it's a significant thing. But then there are other locations. For example, if you were a security guard, or if you were there's all kinds of different positions where it doesn't harm potentially. I say potentially because it could, but there are a lot of jobs that don't require your full attention 100% of the time in order to help customers or clients. You're not interacting with customers or clients. You're just accomplishing some kind of job. And some of those jobs would allow you to be able to use your phone and really wouldn't detract from what you're accomplishing. In fact, it'd make the time go faster and make the job much more enjoyable. So there are a lot of positions where there could be an exception to this mobile device issue that we're talking about. But many times, you just can't get around it. For example, when I'm traveling between appointments, I always have my mobile device ready to answer calls or to make calls. I'm waiting, for something, and in between things, I'll respond to somebody via text or via, email on my phone if I'm not in front of my computer at my office. So there's my mobile device has become very important to how I communicate with my customers and how I stay in contact with them at all times, with that device. So how do we do it? We've just talked about all these different methods via a mobile device, but one of the things that we have to be very careful about when it comes to a mobile device, and this is kind of a theme of what we've been talking about tonight, and I apologize to keep going back to it, but it's so important. And one of the ways that you can have significant impact and a professional positive impact on your workplace is to be always security minded. People who are lax about security will have a hard time being promoted in today's world. Security means so much to every single company's bottom line and to their reputation that they take it very seriously. Even if they don't talk about it all the time, security is still a significant issue for them. And so being cognizant of that and being very sensitive to security issues will help you to seem more professional and to accomplish, in addition to other, metrics that of course management would look at. Security is one that, if you're careful about, will help you to be considered for promotion over somebody else who maybe is not as serious about security issues. When it comes to phones tend to be less secure. The wireless associated, or the wireless network or a wireless connection, both tend to be less secure than a corded line, an Ethernet line, or a high-speed internet line. And so just keep that in mind. That's something to always be aware of, and maybe use your phone less if at all possible. If you're at your desk and you can use a hard line, to email something or to accomplish some kind of communication, that would be superior than picking up your phone in front of your computer and using your phone to accomplish the same thing. So if you've got an option, always default to the more secure, opportunity or option. As far as problems with mobile devices, there are a lot of potential problems with mobile devices. One is, I mentioned earlier that, sometimes we do a sloppy email because, we're just hurrying. Mobile devices can even ratchet up the opportunity for us to make mistakes or do something that, that isn't professional. So, for example, just because a mobile device is smaller, sometimes we'll have more errors. Sometimes it's easy to send something before we're even done completing it. Sometimes we, just miss something because it's harder to see, it's smaller. So there are just ways that, there are more things that can go wrong on a mobile device usually than there are, when we're looking at a full-size screen. And so that's just something to be aware of and something to be careful about on mobile devices. But the mobile device issue is not going anywhere. If anything, like this article, one of the articles that we'll read this week, if anything, we'll probably just become more reliant on mobile devices, and the business world will probably shift even more that direction than it already has as far as workplace environment becoming more mobile. All right, just real quick, talk about texting. Obviously, texting is highly efficient in some situations. It's very easy if somebody's in a meeting, for example. I mean, texting has just changed our world as far as somebody being in a meeting not being accessible, or us being in a meeting and not being accessible. We can't take a call, right, a lot of times in a meeting, but we can take a text. And so if somebody just needs something quick from us or needs to send along a quick message to us, texting can be a highly efficient way to do that. Can also be a highly efficient way just to confirm an appointment or to get an appointment instead of emailing or instead of making a phone call. A lot of people would much rather prefer a quick text when it comes to arranging some kind of meeting or when it comes to arranging any kind of appointment now. It just seems like texting is becoming more the mainstream for things like that. A few short years ago, and I mean a few short, I mean even 5 or 6 years ago, it would have been highly inappropriate to text customers or clients, and now it's highly appropriate to text or clients and receive text from clients. I will usually wait for a client to initiate texting with me before I ever text them. I usually don't make a practice of just out of the blue texting a client that I've never been in a texting conversation before with. So just, as a matter of practice, I think that's appropriate and professional at this point in time. That may change in the future. We may feel more comfortable, to text anybody anytime for any reason. But right now, I still feel like there's a generation of people who would probably not appreciate it if I initiated the texting conversation as their advisor. They would assume that if they text me, that yes, I can text them back and we can text from that point. But if they've never texted me, then it's probably not a good professional way to do things to initiate texting conversations unless you talk to the client about doing so. Okay, but texting is becoming much more important to me as an advisor with my customers to just confirm appointments, to get appointments, to follow up on something quickly. It's just a very easy way for me to communicate that way. So how do we do it? Like I say, the guideline, a professional guideline would be you can initiate a texting conversation with someone who you've already had a texting conversation with, but professionally in a business setting, you probably don't want to initiate texting with somebody that has never initiated it with you already, just as a general rule. And then as far as security, just be aware that texting is less secure and less traceable than emails, of course. Emails are easy to track, easy for companies to regulate, easy for to be used in a court of law if needed. Texting is not yet that easy. Now, I would assume that technology will come along that will create that for texting as well. It's just not. It may already be created, but it's just not widely used at this point. So a lot of companies will discourage texting. My particular regulators will discourage any kind of texting of information about accounts. So they don't want me to text information about performance or something like that. That's information they'd like to have it in a phone call or an email. They don't like texting because they can't trace it and track it and monitor. So they, as a policy, have me text, non-account related things. So like I said before, very commonly to set up appointments and to confirm appointments and to just, one-off little items that are not account related. Okay, so just be aware of that security issue. All right, then you've got instant messaging. Instant messaging can be a powerful tool in a business environment. It's ultra fast, right? It's live time. People don't have to have a mobile device. And some people don't want to be on a mobile device right in the workplace. So, for example, in a bank setting, when you've got customers around the bank, instead of having to look at a phone to get a quick message about, hey, this so-and-so customer's in the branch, come say hi to them. Something like that can be a quick message that's done through IM that is highly effective. Wouldn't have worked via text, right? Because we're not going to be looking at our phones with customers in there, but we can be looking at our screens, and screen IMing can be a highly easy way to just say, hey, are you available, or can we help this certain person out with something? Those kinds of messages are IM's a great way to do that. So what kinds of things do we do? We've kind of talked through that. Quick messages that are effective in an environment where you have a computer in front of you, but not necessarily a mobile device for texting. So similar things to texting, but just not going to be looking at a mobile device, so it's good to have IM. As far as security is concerned, once again, not traceable, not trackable, not reportable. And so regulators in my business, for example, I can't use instant messaging in a business setting. The bank, though, the tellers, bankers, they can use IM, and frankly, it's highly effective for them to use IM to share information quickly or to get a message back and forth between each other while they're helping customers or interfacing with clients. Okay, so it's the security concern that maybe precludes some careers from having IM technology accessible to them, but can be highly effective in certain situations and just a great tool for communicating quick things to each other and coordinating, helping customers and things like that instead of being on your phone. Video conferencing is another phenomenal technology that has changed how we do business. Video conferencing has allowed now a lot of different things. It allows a class like this. Okay, so video conferencing isn't always seeing the person, right? What we're doing right now is like a video conference. Okay, video conference technology. We don't have to have a live class because we can do it this way through a session. But a lot of companies will use it between teams of people and between different colleagues. Different meetings can happen now via teleconference. And why is that powerful? Well, we don't have to fly around the country or fly around the world. We can have a video conference. And it's just such a phenomenal tool to be able to see each other face to face, have a meeting face to face without having to be in person in the same room. Saves millions of dollars for large corporate companies who are always having their teams coordinate with each other. And so it's been a phenomenal tool, but it's also becoming a significant personal. Something like FaceTime, just on the phone, is in essence a video conference, right? And personal relationships, instead of having a phone call that's kind of impersonal sometimes, or an email, FaceTime, you see each other's faces, and that's kind of a uniquely fun. Skyping, with your face, whatever you use, can really be a fun opportunity and a more personal opportunity to interact and to communicate. But the same is true for businesses, and as far as cost savings for businesses, it's phenomenal. Video conferencing allows a lot of flexibility between work sites. It also allows a lot of people nowadays to work from home or from mobile sites around the country. So if you might work for a company that's based out of Dallas and doesn't even have an office in Utah or Idaho, but you work from home because you're able to video conference whenever you need to have meetings, and you're able to communicate so many other ways now, these other ways that we've talked about. There's so many open lines of communication beyond face-to-face now, or snail mail, or direct mail, that we can work from home and still accomplish productive work. So a couple issues with video conferencing. I would say it's highly effective and a great tool. I have been in situations where you just don't feel the same in a video conference as you do if you're sitting around a conference room table. So although it's highly effective and just great to have that as a tool, we can't overstate the fact that face-to-face still there's emotions and body language that maybe can't be fully appreciated through a video conference call like it can in person. So And that's pretty obvious. It's not perfect, but it's very, very good. It's a very, very good alternative to just a phone call or an email. So one of the things I wanted to talk about just briefly is the idea of professionalism. And we've talked about it last week. A lot of the articles that we're reading talk about it. But the bottom line is, when it comes to these different forms of communication, it's difficult sometimes for some people to go from the way that they communicate in email and text and on phone calls with their friends and family, and then use those same forms of communication but communicate very differently when it comes to colleagues, customers, prospects. It's just a whole different world as far as how there should be, how the communication should look and feel. But sometimes it's a difficult conversion, from hey, I was just chatting with my buddy via text, to now I'm talking to a customer via text, and it's got to sound different, right? I can't use the same abbreviations that I do with my buddies. I need to spell things out differently. I need to be more clear. I need to make sure that I sound professional and look professional in how I write things. And so it is different. It should be different. But if you're finding that you have a significant challenge, going from one to the other, it will take practice. And you may find a friend that will allow you to practice a little differently than the jargon that we usually use with friends and family. But however you need to do it, you need to really be cognizant of this different level of professionalism that needs to occur between colleagues, customers, prospects, and the kind that does between you and friends and family. And that sounds obvious, but it's amazing how much, even in a classroom setting, like this through Stevens Henniger, that I get texts or calls or voicemails or emails that are just really, really poorly written, and unfortunately that reflects poorly on the person who wrote it. It doesn't mean that I judge whether or not they're smart or not, or whether or not they're good or not, or anything like that. But I can't help but pass subconscious judgment on their professionalism. And while I'm not a decision maker when it comes to them getting a job or getting an interview or something like that, I can't help but think, if they're not careful, they may be in a situation where they won't get an interview, or they won't get a job opportunity, because of what their communication looks like, what it sounds like. So we gotta practice that. We gotta have opportunities to, we gotta create opportunities to be in that professional mode of thinking and writing, so that when it comes to a potential employer or HR personnel person being in touch with us, that instead of using kind of the low key, very unprofessional lingo that sometimes we do with friends and family, that we step it up and are able to convert or transition into more professional looking communication. We have to be careful when it comes to emails, texts, IM even. We have to be careful how things can be interpreted. So one of the things that I want to be careful on is when we talk about deciding who is our audience on these different forms of communication, and when we make the decision, okay, we've determined who our audience is and why this certain form of communication is appropriate. Once we've decided that, we need to also be careful to think through, when we're before we hit send on whatever it is that we're doing, that we think through how it could be interpreted, or how it could, what perspective or result it could have based on how we sound. Not just what the content is, but how it sounds. And this goes back to professionalism, because if you're going to be very professional about how you use these different methods of communication, you're always being aware and mature about how things sound and how things look and how things feel to the recipient, right? We're being sensitive to that if we're being professional. And we're always being careful to determine an appropriate type of communication. We're not IMing something that really should have been done face-to-face. We're not emailing something that really should have been done on a phone call or in a client meeting. We're not texting something that really should have been done with more detail in an email. So we need to be careful about which one we use and when, and have firm in our mind the why, right? Why did we choose the form of communication that we did? Okay, so we have a couple articles for this week. There are different articles on communication. Some of them most all of them are very, very short. You could do all the required readings in about 15 minutes this week. They're pretty short articles, but they're interesting reads. There's two from the Houston Chronicle. The first Chronicle article, as we've got here on this slide, talks about some different things like how we mix up the casual speak with the professional setting, and we've already alluded to this under professional, so I won't cover it more, but it's just the article is just saying, look, we've got to be careful about not being too casual with our forms of communication, especially in a business setting. And it talks about, different reasons for different forms of communication and different levels of professionalism based on what we're doing. And an easy way to differentiate the two is if you're emailing somebody to confirm a time on an appointment, if you're emailing a buddy about a party, or if you're emailing to try to land an interview or to explain legal options to a client, those three would have very different tones to them probably, and different levels of professionalism, I would hope. I hope that you're not extremely professional with your buddies when talking about a party, and I would hope that you're not extremely casual when talking about something, like a future job interview opportunity or something legal, for a client's sake. And that's pretty straightforward, but it's something to keep on top of mind at all times. And the article also mentions something that I thought was important, and that's our business communication, how we communicate, how professional we are in our communication can really be a significant factor in our ability to become promoted or being promotable. If we have a real hard time communicating effectively and being professional in those communications, it may become very difficult to get a promotion that we're trying for. The other Chronicle article talks about social media like Facebook and Twitter. I think is a nice way that it's a little bit different. Talks about how those can be highly effective forms of communication and advertising. They also can be very, very detrimental. Social media sites like Yelp, different feedback sharing sites, to give feedback to different service and products, has made the world a lot better for you and I as consumers, because we can always check information and feedback on a product before we ever purchase it, and do it very easily and very quickly. Well, that also can be very detrimental to a company who has bad customer service, or who has a site like a Facebook profile, for example, but is doing a poor job on that site, and so getting a lot of negative feedback or negative pub and press. So it can backfire very quickly if we're not careful about it. So the care on those social media sites, they have a consultant on this second Chronicle article that talks about how just simple things like hello and goodbye when writing to somebody on a social media site, a customer or client or prospect, always being honest, of course, and not ever putting out internal issues, company issues, onto any kind of public forum like that. Facebook and Twitter are not the places to discuss, drama that happened at work, or problems that are happening at work, or interpersonal relationship issues. All those things, of course, are not meant to be on those public forums. They're meant for private forums, right? So just be careful about those things. The reason the consultant would refer to those things is that surprisingly, a lot of companies have really messed this up. They've done a great job, getting their name out there, creating a website, creating a blog, creating a Facebook page, having a Twitter line, handle, doing all those different things. But in the end, it's backfired more than it's helped them, because they haven't been careful about the level of professionalism that they use within those sites, and disseminating the right type of information through those sites as well. So just something to keep in mind with social media. Okay, a couple more articles that are required this week. There's a grindstone.com article and a Forbes article. The Grindstone article talks about workplace problems, how to resolve workplace problems using different forms of communication. it stresses the importance of, if at all possible, having face-to-face meetings, having face-to-face or one-on-one conversations. One of the things I really liked about it is it talked about how, most people, if people are swearing in your workplace or just being really offensive or being discriminatory, against your sex or race or culture or ethnicity or there are all kinds of different reasons that somebody could discriminate, right? If that's happening, and it's true discrimination, we should report it, right? We should report it every time. There's no reason to tolerate that kind of thing in the workplace. If we report it and it still doesn't doesn't help the situation at all, the article is good to say, look, a lot of adults are actually much more respectful than they sometimes come across or sound. And so if you pull someone aside and just very tactfully and very kindly and let them know that something is bothering you, many times they'll own it and apologize, and you'll move on, and they won't do that anymore. But if you report it, you've had a conversation with a person, and the culture within your workplace is one of discrimination and just problems like that don't get solved, then you may have to look at changing jobs, of course, right? But we don't look to change the job first, right? There might be an opportunity for you to salvage, the culture that you're in or the setting that you're in by reporting it to HR or reporting it to management, or I should say, you could also, it takes a little bit of courage to do this, but the article is really encouraging to say, look, you may really accomplish quite a bit by taking this person aside and trying to have just a mature conversation about something that's bothering you or offensive to you that's been going on. The Forbes article, as I mentioned when we were talking about emails, I think is very, very interesting. It talks about how email is really creating just a lot of problems actually in the workplace, and how our work environment is getting cluttered with email and the amount of email that we have, and that so many of the emails are forwards or counseling sessions or personal in nature, and are just taking up our time and wasting our time in the workplace. And he gives a lot of different examples of types of emails that just aren't appropriate even for work, but still tend to get sent, because we're all in this world of just email everything. So one of the problems with email is that it's created this culture of, if somebody has a question for you, you should have to respond to it immediately. So we get very impatient about not getting answers immediately. And what he talks about is how that's creating a problem, because people, take their work with them 24/7 now. That at night, at dinner, with their family, out to an event, wherever they are, they're connected, right, to their workplace and their customers and clients, and wherever they are expected to respond rapidly instead of waiting. And so it's a challenge. Email has created an issue where individuals are sometimes just consumed by email all throughout the day, and even after their workday is done. And he talks about the fact that only about 1 out of every 3 emails, according to their data, is actually is necessary for work. Okay, so a lot of our emails are just fluff or junk, stuff that doesn't need to be sent. And then up to 50% of our day in some situations, and he says there are statistics that show more like 25 to 30%, but a lot of people are spending upwards of 50% of their day just in responding and reading emails now. And his point is, unless you're in a job where that's what you do, like customer service via email, and that's it, then we're being highly unproductive, having that much of our day spent with email. So I thought it was a very good article. I think that's a very interesting article, good read for you this week on emails and how emails can become consuming, and they can become a big problem for us. So the question is, does technology really make us more or less efficient? There is a question out there that it could make us less efficient if we're always responding to technology and not accomplishing productive work, right? So a question for you and I is, in our workplaces, in our specific environments, where we work, Is technology becoming a distraction, or is it enabling more productive work? Because if it's enabling more productive work, that's exactly why that technology exists, and then we're in good shape. But in many workplace environments, it's actually distracting from productive work. Even though we feel like we're doing work on our email all day long, it's highly inefficient and unproductive. So another question, and a lot of research has been done on this, is multitasking. If you're doing emails and phone calls and texts, and you got 5 different devices in front of you all throughout the day, and you feel like you're just on top of all of it at all times, balancing all of it, is that efficient or not? Well, most studies say that no. If you're not focused on one thing at a time and highly focused on it, you're probably doing a subpar job at everything. And so this whole idea of multitasking, could just turn you into somebody who is highly inefficient. And so one of the significant business consultants that we had come in over the past 15 years that I've been in this business, I've run into him a couple different times. He's a consulting firm that just focuses on the myth of multitasking, and how, for most of us, it doesn't make any sense to be trying to do multiple things. We need to plan out our day, be very disciplined about responding to communication at only certain times that are pre-planned, and be much more productive that way. So, and that goes to another consulting theme or theory, which is urgent versus important. We get in a situation, because we have so many devices and so many methods of communication now, that everything seems urgent. But not very many of those things are actually important. And so if we can differentiate what's important versus what's urgent, okay, and take care of the urgent, important things very first, obviously, then we take care of the important things, then we take care of the urgent things, and down the list. And we don't even worry about non-urgent, non-important things, right? But we put those important, urgent things right on top. Instead of just responding to everything that seems urgent, like an email, like a text, like a phone call, we start to prioritize and say, okay, I'll respond to those when I'm done with my most important issues for the day, which are usually issues that are the ones that determine our productivity, right? Things that are trying to make us productive and accomplish. So just encourage you to think through what's really urgent, what's really important, and prioritize based on those two things. We want the urgent and important on top. Then we want the important, things that are most important but not urgent. Then we want things that are urgent but not important. And what happens is we usually take that number 3 tier, which are the urgent, unimportant things, and we put them right up on top with everything else that we're doing throughout the day and reacting to. And that's why we become highly unproductive and inefficient in a situation where we've got lots of communication methods. We talked about security throughout tonight. I'm not going to cover it again, but I did want to just mention, the why on it once more. Security is becoming so expensive to companies and so important to their credibility. When Target had that issue, that security breach a few years back, I don't know if you recall, that was one of the first, and then Home Depot had one like 6 months later. Target got thrashed. Their sales went down. They really had a publicity problem, a PR problem, for those 3 or 4 months, where they were the only major corporation for those 3 or 4 months that had gotten hacked. Then when Home Depot had a hack, it seems like there were a handful of companies right about that same time, and it took the edge off of Home Depot. Most people, if you said, what's the largest company to have been hacked, and significant PR issues and problems over the past 5 years because of it, most people can remember the Target hack. Most people wouldn't be able to even remember that there was a significant Home Depot hack unless they were involved in some way and getting some kind of remuneration for it. My point is, if you happen to be the wrong time, have it happen at the wrong time, if you happen to have a significant breach of some kind, those types of things are just devastating to a company. Their credibility, their sales, their bottom line, the fact that they have to expend millions, if not billions of dollars in preventing it from happening in the future, and creating restitution for those that had their information taken, providing software to them, providing protections to them. It just becomes a complete nightmare. So we want to be in the business, wherever we are, whatever career we're in, of trying to be very cognizant and sensitive to issues of security and privacy, because they're just becoming more and more important. And the more we use more devices and more forms of communication in our workplace, the more liability there is, the more potential there is for a problem. So just be aware of that, be careful about it. Try to use the most secure method possible when you're communicating, and if you do so, you'll be in good shape. And like I say, it does count. It gives you brownie points towards your credibility and promotability in the workplace if you're being extra sensitive to security for your management, for your owners. All right, so that's all I've got for tonight. Hopefully you feel comfortable with what you need to do this week. Let me just mention, actually, because we didn't go to the actual instructions for the discussion board, but the instructions are to go through these articles that we've talked about already. So you've got a great head start on kind of what the gist of those articles were. But as I mentioned, it won't take you a long time to read through those. But then also, it asks you to do an interview with a business professional. Just a short interview. But what you're going to be doing for your main post this week is giving me feedback on that interview. And so you've got tomorrow and Wednesday before the main post is due. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to be in touch with someone. It can be a friend or family member, but just someone who's in business, who's in the business world, who has different forms of communication and devices that they use. We're not talking about someone who, at great industries like, for example, waste management, if they're an employee of waste management and they're a garbage collector, or they're a miner, or they're, there's all kinds of different jobs where you don't have communication devices that you're having to use all throughout the day. Let's not interview those folks for this particular interview. We want to interview people who have a lot of different devices at their discretion for their workplace, and we want to find out about what their workplace policy is regarding those communication devices, how they use them, what types of forms of communication they use, and how they use them, and get some feedback on that. So it should be kind of an interesting week this week as far as getting feedback from someone, about that information. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns on it or get stuck. And let me know if you have any questions throughout this week. Best form of communication, as we've talked about before, is an email. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon. Let me know if you have any concerns, and have a great night.